Welcome, welcome to those just signing on. Welcome. I don't think I had a chance to say welcome to
Judy.
Pat Christensen. Good to see you too. This EcoFaith Recovery storytelling training is a part of EcoFaith Recovery, which is a volunteer movement in which we are lifting one another up as fellow leaders using EcoFaith's practices for awakening leadership to support our communities in taking courageous action for climate and environmental justice. We are an EcoFaith recovery cohort seeking to bring healing and justice both to human communities and to all of creation. We seek to ground all of our work first in the land beneath our feet, acknowledging it as the traditional homeland of the peoples who were the first peoples of this land. For me, here in Beaverton, Oregon, that means the Kalapuya people, the northern branch of the Kalapuya people. And if you know the first peoples of the land where you are currently sitting, I invite you to unmute yourself and share that, or you can type it into the chat box if you prefer.
Clackamas.
Cowlitz and Clackamas.
Multnomah. Thank you. May our work today honor the ancestors and descendants of these peoples present among us. Secondly, we ground our work in our first practice of accessing spiritual power, consciously connecting with the indwelling God to rediscover our belovedness, our God-given power, and our place within God's evolving universe. I now invite Scott to read our practice number 1, the Litany and Prayer.
Thank you, Robin. Whether this is your first time participating in this gathering or you have been coming for a while, we are glad you are here. If you have felt overwhelmed, angry, or afraid in response to news of increasing climate disruptions, escalating environmental injustice, or racial injustice, you are not alone. You have a place among us here. If you have found yourself burned out by one action after another, done for a good cause, you are not alone. You have a place among us here. If you have been seduced into believing that you have no story that is valid, no wisdom to offer, no gifts that matter, no power to make a difference, you are not alone. You have a place among us here. If you have found that your spiritual practices are not sufficiently rooting you to weather the storms of climate disruptions and environmental injustice, you are not alone. You have a place among us here. As we trust that God can bring us out of isolation and despair into authentic communities willing to act together, our spiritual and relational resources expand. We remember that we can organize with our communities to facilitate the diverse flourishing of life in a world embodying love for all and justice for the dispossessed. To do this, we will take 1 minute for silent prayer, remembering the human and other than human communities that have been repeatedly silenced. In this minute of silence, please type into the chat box one human and one other than human community that has been silenced or are currently experiencing disproportionate harm due to climate disruptions, environmental injustice, or other public threats. And now I invite you to unmute yourselves and join me in the EcoFaith version of the Serenity Prayer, inspired by African-American activist Angela Davis. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change,
the courage
to
to change the
the
things we cannot
accept,
accept, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Amen.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. EcoFaith's practice 2 engages us in developing relationships to consciously awaken the power among that arises when we engage in authentic conversation and relationships. To help us facilitate a relational culture, we will now introduce ourselves by our first names. That's one thing. The name of our community and the campaign that you are thinking about inviting people to through your story of now. Okay, so our name, our community, and the campaign that you are thinking about or planning to invite people into through your story of now. So we're using today this word campaign as the dictionary defines it, which is work in an organized and active way towards a particular goal. So we're not referring here just to a partisan activity. Now, that may be, your campaign may be a partisan campaign, okay? But for many people, it may not be a partisan campaign. It's okay if you don't know what your campaign is or your action is yet. We're gonna share a few possibilities soon, but we really invite you to use your story. That's what we're gonna be focusing on today, is how does our story focus or does it work in service of a specific campaign? While we want these stories and the storytelling skills you have learned to be usable forever, it's important that we place them in service of action for justice. So we know that politicians are using our stories all the time. Advertisers are using our stories all the time. And they're using our stories and they're saying, vote or buy this or do that. We're trying to reclaim our stories and to invite the action that necessarily flows out of our story in the way that we think it makes the most sense, not leaving it to somebody else to decide what action our story is in service of, right? But we think the logical outcome of our story is to take action in service of this campaign. And that's what we're planning to do. And we are inviting others to do that with us. So I'll begin with my introduction. My name's Robin Hartwig. My faith community is St. Andrew Lutheran in Beaverton. And I am planning to use my story to support and equip clergy and other faith leaders in swing states to tell their stories and get out the vote. Particularly, I'm focusing on my denomination. Supporting and equipping clergy and other leaders who I may know in swing states to tell their stories and to help get out the vote there. So I'm going to now just call on you, if you don't mind, in the interest of efficiency here, to share your name, your community, and what you are planning to use your story in service of, and it's fine to say, I don't know. Jenny Lee, can I start with you, because you're in my upper left box.
Sure. So my name is Jenny Lee Porch, and the community I'm thinking of is I'm involved in a number of entrepreneur communities, and so I think I will use my story to kind of call them to be more conscious and use that as an avenue. Do I call you? Okay.
No, that's good. I'll do that next piece this time. Thanks, Jenny Lee. Scott.
Yeah, my name is Scott. My faith community is Waverly UCC, and I plan to use my story in the service of advocating for the Green New Deal and turning out voters in support of Green New Deal candidates.
Thank you, Scott. Deetra.
I'm Deidre Sheets, and I consider myself a cross-pollinator between several communities, sectors, disciplines, and currently I'm focused on developing an initiative called Nutrition Garden RX. It's to optimize small space gardens for climate and health benefits with and for low-income populations.
Thank you. Carol Harker.
My name is Carol Harker. I'm affiliated with St. Andrew Lutheran Church, and the campaign I'm supporting is EcoFaith Recovery's Community Carbon Project.
Thank you, Carol. Peter.
My name is Peter Sergienko. I'm a member of St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church in Northeast Portland, and I'm telling my story to support the movement for Black lives.
Thanks, Peter. Pamela, please.
Hi, My name is Pamela, and I am from Pachamama Alliance, and I'm using my story to help further drawdown initiatives.
Thank you, Pamela. Harriet.
Hello, my name is Harriet. Scott stole my campaign. I'm from Congregations Pneor and Havra Shalom and 350.org. And I am passionately wanting to spread the new gospel of the Green New Deal and help whoever I talk to feel as passionate about it as I do.
Thank you, Harriet. Ed.
My name's Ed Kale. I'm a member of St. Ignatius Parish, and I'm going to use my story to help in putting on Just Faith Ministries programs for racial equity, racial healing, and racial justice. That's it.
Thank you, Ed. Pat Christensen.
I'm Pat Christensen from St. Andrew Lutheran in Beaverton, and I also would like to use my story to encourage people to join specifically our community's community carbon garden initiative, and then a broader initiative to change the way we look at our backyards and our front yards.
Thank you, Pat. Morning. It says morning. Who is morning?
I think that's Judy.
Judy is
Wilder.
morning. Yes.
Judy Wilder, yeah.
Sorry. I'm on my phone and I'm a computer cretin. My name is Judy Wilder. I'm a member of First Unitarian. And I'm not sure how to do this because I don't feel like I'm already a member of an organization that promotes and listening to Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you so much. Lisa.
So my name is Lisa Hatton. I am a member of St. Andrew Catholic Church, and I'm planning to use my story to help people get out the vote.
Thank you, Lisa. Emily.
Okay, I'm Emily Herbert with First Unitarian Church. I'm hoping to use my stories to get out the vote and then to focus on climate justice locally.
Thank you, Emily. Chris Beckmeyer.
Chris with Central Lutheran here in Portland, and my story is aimed also at getting out the vote, primarily related to swing states, and currently primarily around voting by mail.
Thank you, Chris. Anne and Catherine.
I'm Catherine Bax, a member of St. Andrew's Catholic Church in Northeast Portland. I'm planning on using my story to kind of organize people in Portland to work on getting out the vote and in swing states. Also, I don't know if I'm going to make two stories. I haven't made any yet, but and that's really why I started this process, is to stories to do something about climate justice and bring. I don't know what my audience is really yet.
Thank you, Catherine. Anne?
So I'm Anne Turner and St. Andrew Catholic Church, and So we are working on this project that involves a number of people at St. Andrew, as well as some other folks around, using the Vote Forward campaign to get out the vote, particularly in swing states. And my story is similar in also wanting to kind of make my voice more powerful in terms of engaging people in climate, because I feel like it's something that is easy to, well, that's going to be for the future. We'll do that later. But it's upon us now.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Yeah.
Linda.
Linda Kale, I'm St. Ignatius Parish. I'm narrowing down my focus for the campaign here, but it will have something to do with a marriage of climate, gardening, and racial justice. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. That's wonderful. Great. I think I pass it off to Scott now.
Sure. Thank you. So I just want to acknowledge that we have been drawing throughout this workshop on material from Professor Marshall Gans, and that we are using this material with permission of Professor Gans and the Harvard Kennedy School. In the first two sessions, we emphasized the story of self. And this is our central piece in our story of self, us now. We created our story of self, practiced it, did some mentoring, and shared it and observed some models as well. Today, we're concluding by integrating the story of us and the story of now with our story of self. We'll have another opportunity to share our full story and to mentor each other in small groups. And as you can get a sense, we're also going to weave into that possible campaigns for our stories. And it's great to hear all the different campaigns that people are thinking about. It's terrific. The story of now communicates the urgent challenge we are called upon to face, such as reversing global warming, drawdown. We strive to instill hope in the face of a major challenge. We strive to provide a credible vision on how we'll achieve a positive outcome. The story of now calls on others to make a choice to join you in taking action. This action that we propose should be more than a vague, we must all choose to live simpler lives, or an overwhelming, we must do these 40 things. A meaningful choice requires a concrete action that we can take now and we can take together towards an outcome that we can achieve. The story of us aims to create connection between your audience and your story of self. You might be seeking to bring new acquaintances into a community, or maybe you're trying to call a familiar community into action. The story of us communicates why we are called to action and the agency that we have to achieve an outcome. It motivates people to act together in order to have the capacity and the perseverance to address the challenge. So now I'll turn it back to Robin to share some ideas for action.
Great, thanks, Scott. So now we have a chance to hear 3 stories, each with an invitation to a different campaign or action. We recall that we're thinking of campaigns as working in an organized or active way toward a particular goal. So it doesn't have to be a partisan campaign for a particular leader. Remember, it's something towards a specific achievable goal. That's a campaign. We also keep in mind that faith communities and other nonprofits are not able to advocate for specific candidates or take partisan actions. That's if they have a 501c3 status. It's not their religion or their faith commitments that keeps them from doing that, right? It's IRS tax exempt status is really what it is, let's be honest, okay? And so if you don't want to lose that, then the law is you don't advocate for particular candidates. Yet, this is a big yet, our communities can take courageous, values-based positions on issues like racial justice or climate justice. Faith communities played a strong role in the civil rights movement. People of faith can also form independent groups outside their faith communities to take action together. So the IRS 501c3 status says nothing to you as individuals if you happen to have a bunch of friends in your faith community or friends not in your faith community, to organize with them for any kind of campaign, partisan or not, just to be clear. So as you listen to these particular stories, listen for which campaign is most like the one you have in mind, or if you don't have a campaign in mind, decide which campaign you are most likely to participate in, even just for today. Like, I want to try that one on for today, or that feels something like a campaign that I might be interested in, because we're going to end up going into groups, breakout groups. So at a certain point, I'll invite you to put a number in front of your name, to name yourself with a number at the beginning, to help Jenny Lee break us into groups of people who have a similar interest that we do, or a similar lack of clarity about their interest as we do. But for right now, let me invite Scott to share his story and invitation into a campaign. And as he talks about get out the vote, just so you're aware, that's going to be grouping number 1.
Thanks, Robin. I know that the 2020 elections, particularly at the national state levels, are critically important to the future of our democracy, our nation, and indeed, the earth. We have an opportunity to set a new path towards God's beloved community with a just, caring, and inclusive society. And yet, I feel somewhat powerless at influencing the outcome. How about you? I'm grateful to be here in Portland with many like-minded progressives, but it's both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing that my representatives are progressive, so they're already promoting policies aligned with my values of justice, equity, care for all people, and care for the earth. It's a blessing to have so many people like you to work alongside in our justice-seeking, creation-caring actions. But it's a curse because I can't influence the balance of power at the national level. It's a curse because here I'm preaching to the choir. And don't get me started on the Electoral College. Oregon is nigh irrelevant with only 7 votes. I've long held the opinion that I should only use my power towards elections of positions that represent me, my representative, my senators, my governor, and the presidency. I find it an outrage that some wealthy person, or worse yet, wealthy corporation outside my district can influence the election in my district. I didn't want to be part of that, so I kept my nose inside my own tent, so to speak. So I struggled when I saw the Sunrise Movement put out a call to help nominate a progressive candidate for Senate in Kentucky. What do I know about Kentucky's issues? Right do I have to talk with Kentuckians about their representatives? Then I got to thinking about Mitch McConnell, one of Kentucky's senators and Senate Majority Leader. Mitch infuriates me. He has done so much to obstruct just legislation, sustain injustice, and entrench powerful interests. What right does this one man have to dominate the policy direction of our entire nation? Then revelation. Mitch has had an enormous impact on me over the past 15 years, the senator Kentuckians elected. So I have every right to talk with Kentuckians about their election because their decision affects me deeply. So I decided to join with the Sunrise Movement volunteers and working to nominate a Black candidate with a progressive Green New Deal agenda for Mitch's seat. I spoke with Kentuckians from Louisville to Eastern Kentucky, sharing my story and urging them to vote for the Sunrise candidate. It felt really good to use my power for this important cause, and it felt entirely appropriate for me to use my power in this way. Kentucky's senator affects you as well, so you have every right to talk with Kentuckians too. And not just Kentucky, but also in other swing states, so we can limit Mitch's power even if we don't unseat him. And then there is the presidency, where the outcome hinges on just a few states. Oregon isn't one of them. So I'm going to work on turning out the vote in swing states by writing letters to voters from underrepresented communities. They could have tipped the scale back in 2016. We need to make sure that the scale gets tipped in our direction for 2020. Please add your thumb to tipping the scale by joining me in writing letters to swing state voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Wow, I haven't heard Scott tell that story before. That's awesome to hear that, Scott. So next, let's turn to Carol Harker for her story. And Carol's is going to relate to community carbon, which, just so you're aware, is going to be number 2. If you end up wanting to be in a group with those who are offering their story in service of community carbon and carbon gardens, you'll be putting a 2 at the beginning of your name. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. I've cared about climate and the health of the earth for most of my life, which began close to the land in North Dakota. Our climate was harsh and we paid attention. Even as kids, we knew that it wouldn't snow if it was 40 below. That spring breakup unleashed a thundering force of ice and water that could rip massive trees from the ground and turn them into battering rams. We had to pay attention to the forces of climate on our environment, and I've been paying attention ever since. But it was a conversation with my grandson Sam that propelled me into fervent action to protect our earth and to slow climate change. We were in the car talking, and I asked Sam about his dreams for the future. He was 15, and I wondered what he hoped to make of his life. I was shocked when he answered that he doesn't think much about the future because, as he put it, we're toast. The environment is falling apart and not likely to be able to sustain us much longer. So Sam told me he lives for the now. I was utterly deflated, but that conversation was my wake-up call. I committed myself to doing everything I can to make sure that Sam and his generation will live in a bountiful world that enables people, plants, and animals to flourish. By heritage, I'm a stubborn Norwegian, and I rebel when I'm told that nothing can be done. The fact is, we all can do something, and I'm determined to get others to act with me. Our yards make up the largest irrigated crop in America, and the way most of us manage them exacts a costly toll. We fertilize, mow, and water, pollute the neighborhood with noise, and remove habitat that's welcoming to wildlife. I read a seminal book, Kristen Olson's The Soil Will Save Us, and I learned that we can use the land around our homes for the good of the planet. It turns out that by taking some small steps, we not only improve our atmosphere, but we improve our soil as well. And healthy soil can nourish an abundant, nutritious food supply, decrease flooding and erosion, conserve water, reduce pests, support diverse wildlife, and more. We can sequester and store more carbon, actually removing it from the atmosphere. I can make intentional changes on my quarter-acre suburban lot, and you can do the same. When we work together, we quickly benefit from the dynamics of the multiplier effect. It's not that hard. It's fun, actually, and we all learn so much from each other. We find beauty and inspiration in the world around us. We strengthen friendships and make new ones. As we learn more, we hone our practices to become even more effective. We gather base data and we track measurable changes. We convert dead, depleted soil into a vibrant system wriggling with life. We get out of the way and we assist nature's efforts to restore equilibrium. Join us in EcoFaith Recovery's Community Carbon Project. Share your talent and energy and insights. We can shift the carbon balance for the good of all living things today and into the future. Our leaders aren't doing enough, so we must. Let's be good stewards of this earth so our grandkids can enjoy it too. To get involved with Community Carbon, email me at shoregirl@gmail.com or learn more at www.ecofaithrecovery.org/carbon garden. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you. It's Community Carbon Initiative, Carbon Gardening. And in addition to offering that glimpse of a campaign, Carol's also offering that anyone who wants to know more about that initiative can get in touch with her as well. Carol, would you put your email into the chat since you had said that, just in case people didn't catch that? Would be great. So number 3 is Harriet's story and call to action. This is going to have to do with Green New Deal, and that's going to be campaign number 3 for those who are going to find that that most aligns with their interests. Thank you, Harriet.
Well, thank you, Carol and Scott. I love all these campaigns and love how they all work together. My story began when I was practicing medicine and became disillusioned with the limitations of this conventional and superficial approach to healing. I had my own health challenges and began to explore naturopathic and mind-body medicine, including meditation. After profound healing experiences for both myself and my energy medicine clients, I went back to school to learn how to do research on these therapies, thinking this would become my second career. Halfway through my program, however, while designing a study on the trauma clearing work I'd been doing for years, I became violently ill doing that work and had to stop. It felt like God had led me on a path and it abruptly changed direction. My last class in the program was Leadership in Sustainability. That was when I had my oh shit moment. I was concerned about what I would do for a career when I realized our whole civilization was heading over a cliff. From climate change to ocean acidification to massive species extinction to gaping and growing disparities of health, wealth, income, and poverty, I began to rapidly spiral into a deep depression. My marriage was also unraveling, and my plan to finish the program, find work, and leave my marriage felt as impossible as solving the dire problems of our world. With the depression, my memory and capacity to organize my thoughts disintegrated. My attempts to find work went no place. What sustained me was my meditation practice and my connection to God. Inner guidance navigated a path out of my marriage and onto a path of recovery from my depression. My study of how we came to our climate and economic crises were part of my medicine. Spirit guided me to authors and books about sustainable economics and to economic justice group, which gave me a sense of belonging. I did not, at that point, know much about politics, but I stumbled onto sociologist George Lakey, who came to Portland to promote his book, Viking Economics, the story of how the Nordic countries transformed their economy from one directed towards wealth accumulation to one that served the well-being of all. The key to their transformation was a clear, broad vision of the values and goals that the people intended to achieve. To help me remember what I read, I started teaching small classes on sustainability. This became my prayer. Then AOC and the Sunrise Movement brought out the Green New Deal, the vision and the map for how to heal the world. My work became learning how to promote it widely, teaching how to get others interested and passionate about this broad vision for health and justice for all people on a healthy planet. What the Green New Deal needs is a movement of movements. It brings together economic, climate, ecological, and human health and justice. It's a vision that is possible and realistic. It is also some of the deepest medicine, a healthy environment, and dignity and opportunity for all. I'm part of the 350 Green New Deal team. Invite us to talk to your community about the Green New Deal and how to help make it a reality. It will take all of us. Thank you.
Wow. Harriet, thank you. 3 powerful stories. Well, look at this progress that we're making together here, supporting one another in making. And thank you, Scott, Carol, and Harriet, to our 3 courageous storytellers. I'm feeling super grateful for your modeling and inspired at the moment by all 3 of those stories. And that's not in the script. I just added that because it's how I'm legitimately feeling right now. So we're about to break into our groups based on our campaign interests. And so we have 4 options basically right now of things to put in front of rename yourself, as Scott has done and I have done. You'll see we both are interested in get out the vote. Personally, I'm actually interested in all 3 of these, but from now until November, I'm especially interested in get out the vote. Then I'm going to throw in behind both Community Carbon and Green New Deal more powerfully. So number 1, get out the vote. Number 2, Community Carbon, the one that Carol spoke to. Number 3, Green New Deal with Harriet, if that's something that might relate to a campaign that you are interested in offering your story and service of. And number 4, for something else. You already know what it is. It's not one of those. And it's a something else type of thing. And if so, put a 4 in front of your name. And if you need help renaming yourself, you can either unmute yourself and ask one of us to do it, or send a chat message to Jenny Lee, and either one, and she can rename you. While people are doing that, can we just have a little popcorn, like a few sentences about what was effective about any of those stories for you? I'll say I could see the action when it comes to the story of now. I mean, I felt inspired and I felt like there was somewhere for my energy to go. I'm inviting somebody to come and talk to my faith community. I'm, going to send an email to Carol and learn more. I'm going to, join Scott. There's a specific thing I'm going to do. It's going to be a larger path onto a larger campaign. But to Scott's initial point, it's like there's a there, something I can do right now that sets me on that path. That was one thing I noticed. So just a couple other popcorn things that you noticed before we break into groups about what worked in any of those stories. You can just unmute yourself.
As is always true, I think, with storytelling, it's the personal part, personal connection. I mean, all 3 of you really helped me get to know you better. And we have shared experiences. And that really helped bring me into your story.
Thank you, Pat. Absolutely. Ed, you go ahead.
Indignation. I could identify with Scott's indignation at being excluded, his voice being excluded, and his constructive response to being treated that way.
Matt Gwynn is a Kingian nonviolence trainer who's been a part of EcoFaith recovery in the past, and he talks about anger as being a real motivating force. But too often we have these venting sessions with friends, and then we leave the venting session and the edge is off. And we're missing an opportunity, he says, when we do that, because when we have that indignation or that anger, that can be a force and energy towards change. But when I just call up a friend and I vent and I hang up the phone and I feel better, I've lost the opportunity to organize with other people to actually take that frustration, that anger, that indignation into real change in the real world. That's really had an impact on me when Matt taught a bunch of us in EcoFaith that. Was there somebody else had their hand up? Oh, Pamela.
I really appreciated Carol mentioning her grandson Sam and just that connection as an elder, thinking about the level of despair. and then being able to do something in your own backyard, literally, I think is a really always a motivating thing.
Chris.
I just wanted to say that I felt like Harriet's willingness to be vulnerable was really powerful. The more we are able to be vulnerable, the more we draw people into our story. And that really is.
So now it's time to go into our breakout groups. EcoFaith Practice 4 engages us to mentor one another, to consciously draw out the gifts, wisdom, and life-giving power of others, and share our own by mentoring and being mentored. In the community dimension, we seek to develop mentoring relationships and a culture of mutual mentoring within all of our communities. So what we're going to do is break into groups of 3 to the best of Jenny Lee's ability, and break into the campaign affinity groups. This will follow the same pattern as we did 2 weeks ago, where we will have 30 minutes total in the session with 3 storytellers. And those 3 storytellers get 10 minutes each. We'll ask you to have a timekeeper for each storyteller and to mark minutes 3, 4, and 5, and ask the storyteller to stop at minute 5. Then the listeners give feedback. We suggest that the listeners provide feedback by identifying strong, resonant moments in the story. Be specific about what brought the story alive for you and what you loved about the story. And coach a gap, something that was missing or something that you want more of in the story, by asking questions of who, when, or why. So Jenny Lee will now break us into groups for 30 minutes. Have fun sharing your stories. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Let's see, we're about 10 minutes behind schedule. So I'll just ask for a few minutes of popcorn of any lessons that you learned in your group that you would like to share with others.
I could. This is Emily. The personal seemed to be really important. Personal parts we told of our story were definitely noticed by the people who listened.
I would say that also having a Robin connected me with my story. She was pointing out that it would be best to have a real now action, something really specific. So if I was talking about Vote Forward, maybe it's even having a little card or something that says, if you'd like to get involved with Vote Forward, here's the website, so that they don't forget, or get home and at least they've got a takeaway right from our conversation. Or if we were on Zoom or something with a big group of people, we could say, put up on the screen or in the chat or whatever, but actually to give somebody that takeaway so that they can follow up and not forget about it.
Thank you, Lisa.
Carol, you're
muted.
What I got was the importance of some specificity toward the end. I tended to be very general at the end because I was already over time, but that specificity is necessary. So instead of the Green New Deal, the 4 overarching themes that make it that holistic vision. What do you do with it? How do you move it forward? So adding that, better to be a little long-winded and include those important pieces.
Very good. Thanks, Harriet.
So can I say something, Scott?
Yes.
What I really loved in the stories from our group were how the storytellers engaged the senses, the taste of choke cherries, the sounds of warfare in West Africa. I think engaging the senses helps all of us have a more immediate connection to something, because most of us can see and hear and smell and taste, and it makes the story livelier, I think.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you.
Unmute. All right. Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
When people do their story of self, what draws you in is you kind of get a snapshot of who that person is. And then when they move on to their story of us and their action, you feel like you could join them because you know a little, it's grounded in someone, as opposed to just, here's an action, let's all do it together.
Woohoo! I think Marshall Gans would just be applauding with all this stuff. This is great, really great. I'm really pleased what we've achieved here. All right, thank you, everyone. I'm going to turn it to Jenny Lee.
Yes, thank you. So we now move to practice 5, which is act together. Practice 5 states that we consciously engage the power of collective action in the service of God's healing and justice-seeking work for human communities and the whole creation. And so now, as we prepare to talk about the other ways we are acting together, we take a moment to pass the virtual basket, recognizing that organizing our money to support climate justice is one significant way we are acting together. EcoFaith is funded entirely by the contributions of individuals and faith communities. We recognize that many people and organizations are suffering financial hardship, particularly at this time. As part of our eco-justice values, we invite you to consider not only contributing to EcoFaith, but making matching donations to a frontline community and EcoFaith Recovery today. So visit ecofaithrecovery.org/give to make a contribution in whatever amount is right for you. And monthly contributions of any amount are a particularly effective way to help expand EcoFaith's work. And lastly, I wanted to share with you, let me put that in here first. We are doing a fundraiser called Chalk the Walk. So I'm just going to share my screen for a second. And it starts today. But you may have done Chalk the Walks before in your communities. It's a really fun way to engage your creativity, and actually you can use this as a way to share part of your story. And so if you think about it, you're decorating a space in your neighborhood and you're speaking to that audience in a sense. Your neighbors or someplace in your community where you can share possibly a message about voting. We have some examples down here of like, vote with the earth in mind. But you can kind of decide however you want to do that. And this is just an opportunity where you can create that design, you take a picture of it, you send it back to us, and we'll share it out with the community. And then we just invite you to make that donation to EcoFaith and a frontline community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny Lee. So now, in the interest of our mutual leadership, growth, and development, I'd just like to have us take a few minutes to share any reflections regarding our workshop, including any constructive feedback for one another, power dynamics you experience, and anything else you noticed during these workshops that we can learn from. Anything that you'd like to share?
I thought you did a great job of balancing leadership and small group discussion, and so that all of our voices have a space, and bringing people together to share after our small groups. I think that's a beautiful model of really drawing in the wisdom of all of our years.
Thank you. Linda.
I liked what you sent us online, all of that printed information from Marshall Gans that got us started in the beginning before we wrote the stories, and then the very specific stories that you shared that kind of were like a prompt for us to get us to write our story.
Thank you, Linda. Ed, yeah.
I second that, and also I appreciate the care that goes into preparing these things ahead of time, and that says a lot about respecting us as participants, and I really appreciate the effort, which I know is not 10 minutes. It's a big time commitment to get ready to do this, so appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed. I really appreciated the opportunity to tell my story. It just is so different to read it aloud to this to a group as it is to either just read it silently or even read it to myself. It really makes a difference to to practice it in front of in community. So I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to do that, and then mentoring each other as well.
Emily here. I just wanted to say the stories are just fabulous models, and it makes me really want to work harder on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
I just want to also thank Robin for sharing that a little bit about Tyler, because he has put so much of his energy and heart into this workshop, and he cares about it. And so just, I mean, it's important when we acknowledge that others in our community are hurting. So thank you for just sharing that piece, Robin, because he's with us.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Chris. Pamela.
It's really heartening for me just to hear, the different stories I have heard about what different folks are doing. And it was really hard to choose which group to go into. So to any extent that you have actions that would be appropriate to share by email, I would love to hear about them, because it's really heartening to know great things going on and to have heard your stories.
Thank you, Pamela. All right, Robin, I'll turn it to you.
Great. So Pamela just referenced about hearing from other people. Typically when folks have been engaged in a significant EcoFaith opportunity like this, we have a listserv, which is leaders@ecofaithrecovery.org. And Jenny Lee would go ahead and add you to that. If you don't want to be on it, please let her know, because most people do, for the exact reason Pamela just shared. People are like, I want to know what else you're up to, or find out if you have particular invitations you would like to share, or you might want to share invitations. It's not like everything doesn't come out of central EcoFaith somewhere. We're very part-time staff. So on that leaders listserv, it's really all of you, like 300 or some people sharing with one another, as well as what we're able to coordinate together. I'd also like to share that, as Chris mentioned, Tyler and Scott, I'd like to say, have really had a significant leadership role in developing this whole 3-session workshop. I've been privileged to meet with them, but they've done a lot. The bulk of the heavy lifting. Peter Sergienko also helped. The two of those guys are the ones who really did the heavy lifting. And so what I have here is a 27-page Google Doc printed out of the 3 sessions that can be done again. If you've gotten kind of caught fire with storytelling, and I've heard a bunch of your stories now, and you all are really doing some amazing things with these stories. We were not experts. Tyler and Peter and Scott and I wanted to get better at telling our own story. And so we were watching Marshall Gant's videos, talking about it, doing it with you. EcoFaith is all about leaders mutually mentoring one another. So if that's something you have interest in, like, hey, I'd be willing to take a leadership role and help bring this to other people, please just reach out to Scott or Jenny Lee or me, and we'd love to bring you in on that if that's, and to hear more feedback if you'd have more ideas about how this could be even stronger in the future. Also, our Metro Portland EcoFaith leaders are likely within about a week to launch a mechanism whereby we who are passionate about getting out the vote can work with one another to do that. And so we'll be sending out an email hopefully within the week about how congregations can get more engaged in that, and how individuals who are willing to share their story and take action as part of action teams can do it. If you want to know more sooner rather than later, you can stick around afterwards. I can tell you more about it, but otherwise just watch for that email. Our practice number 7 is to restore balance, and practice 7 of restoring balance is the goal of all of the practices and all of our actions. So as I read the summary of that practice, it is to consciously realign our lives with the sacred and natural rhythms of life expressed through the whole of God's creation. As we go forth from this gathering, may we always remember that we are not alone, and that it is not all up to us. May we remember that we are called to be faithful regardless of whether we are successful, and that we indeed are one small but miraculous part of God's evolving universe. I welcome you to please type an intention into the chat box as to how you will work to restore balance during the coming week, whether that's at the individual level, the interpersonal level, the community level, or the public arena. What's your intention of how you are hoping, intending to work towards restoring balance during the coming week? Feel free to type that into the chat box now. I always enjoy taking a look at what others have typed because a lot of times it gives me other ideas of ways I might also like to focus on restoring balance during the coming week. And so now we close by again consciously engaging in practice 1, accessing our spiritual power. First, I just invite you to take a moment of silence and some deep breaths with me. And after time for about 3 deep breaths, please unmute yourself and we'll join in the EcoFaith version of the Serenity Prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept things we cannot change, the courage to change things we cannot accept, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Amen. Thank you all for your participation in EcoFaith Recovery today. You are EcoFaith today, and I'm really grateful.
Thank you, Rob.
Absolutely. If anyone has questions or anything else you wanted to talk about, feel free to stay on the line. Thank you for this time, and we'll look forward to ways you might like to be engaged in the future, particularly first, third, and fifth Thursday mornings from 8:45 till 10:15. Those of you interested in working on getting out the vote, we'll be really welcoming you to join a fellow EcoFaith leaders at that time. More information will come out about that.